6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How about we do it again?
6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I followed it.
Okay, let's try one more
I
time.
definitely
Ready?
I can move you. Making review. Making review.
Say 6,
6,
5,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Rank and Review in this echoey chamber that I find myself in. It's an interesting episode for a few reasons, in that I'm going to discuss the new Disney trilogy of Star Wars. The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker. Are they successful trilogies? Are they successful movies? Do some work, do some not? We're going to get into it, and it's a big, controversial, a lot of emotions mixed in kind of subject. Star Wars brings baggage. And also, I recently talked about the Twilight Zone. I had sort of a Twilight Zone recording session. Eric and Ashley, who had helped me a lot in the past doing episodes of the podcast, did the first half of the Star Wars podcast, did talk with me about all of the Star Wars movies, and we already did one episode with them, and we did talk about all three of these movies, but upon playing back my recording, a lot of Ashley's dialogue especially is muted, but it's creepy in Twilight Zone because I was recording live in the air, and I was talking and responding to Ashley. I could hear her, and yet somehow her voice is vanished at proportions, especially during my last review. She just seemed to be there but not there. So, solution. I got Matt Risling to talk me through the last of the three films as well, and I will definitely make sure that Erich and Ashley Jurgens' voice get heard as well, as far as their opinion on the film. But I'm going to have Erich and Ashley Jurgens help me talk through the first two, that is, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker. I'm going to have my friend Matt Risling help me with. And to start off this, there's going to be a fairly snarky discussion between Lee Beckmann and I about Star Wars, about fandom, and about, the relevance of the newest Star Wars trilogy and perhaps what is to come. So you got four guests that you're going to be listening to this episode: Lee Beckmann, Ashley Jurgens, Erich Jurgens, and Mr. Matt Risling. I, as always, am your host and random Canadian, Larry Parsons. If you have feedback, please be kind and please send it to ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. The website is Ranknreview.ca. Please forgive any coarse language or spoilers for the three movies we're discussing. And may the Force be with you. So I have this quandary about Star Wars that I want to bug you about.
Okay.
Now, what do we as fans really want and expect from a Star Wars movie? We've talked about the new trilogy in this episode, and it's weird because there's a lot of parallels to me in its trajectory as there is in the new Halloween trilogy.
Alrighty.
The first installment was fairly, entertaining, fairly solid, but what you would expect as a fan of the genre.
You're talking of Halloween
I'm
right
talking
now,
about both of them.
Okay.
The second one has some problematic elements, but because it is the middle child in the trilogy, I feel like the fans were giving it a lot of room because, we're going to finish strong. We're going to tie up all of these frayed and loose ends in the third movie. and the third movie fails spectacularly at doing any of those things.
Okay.
Now, I mean, horror fans and Star Wars fans are different animals, but I think that what they want is similar in that, like, they want to have their fandom honored.
Yeah.
And the longer I digest these new Star Wars movies, the more I'm like, is the problem... I mean, the problem is, to a degree, Disney's, because they made the movie, but
Sure.
is the problem at least as much the fans as it is Walt Disney?
No, I think you have to know the genre that you're doing. And we've got separate problems with both the Star Wars franchise and the Halloween franchise, because one, do not have a plaster man,
That's
to quote James Lawrence,
clear, yeah.
where Halloween, they did have a plan, but the second and third one were going to be shot back to back, so they already had that. They already had that in their back pocket. Where clearly with the Star Wars, they did not. But the ending was the same. So in some ways, yes, fans' expectations can be troubling because you want a consistent. Like Star Wars, to me, is a good space opera with it's Knights of the Round Table with lightsabers and fucking Wookiees.
Yeah. Let's start there then. What was your relation to to Star Wars when you were a kid? Was it big? Did it loom large in your world?
Yeah, it did. It was one of the few movies where a sense of wonderment, like I hadn't really seen this before, and a sense of wonderment came over me. I even remember in the backyard of our dear comrade Axton Francis, as we were watching Star Wars on that big screen he put up in the back, and asked the neighbors if he could have those nighttime showings. And that Attack of the Death Star, good God, it's still glorious. Like, you are just filled with wonder at that sequence.
So you're talking about something that you have fierce attachment with from your childhood, and
Sure.
then 40 years later, or 35 years later, they're doing Nouveau Star Wars. And again, we've already had the prequels, and in my opinion, the prequels already shat the bed pretty thoroughly.
Yeah.
But there's so much vitriol online. Like, you look online about Disney's Star Wars, and just the hate, the anger, the betrayal. And I've started to come around. It's not that I pity, oh, poor Disney, but what possible product could they give us that we would be accepting at this point? People hated Solo. It's not a bad movie, but it's not...
But the hate wasn't as strong for that as, say, Last Jedi. Like, when Last Jedi came out, and really, its story structure is almost similar to Empire, if you stop and you think about it. Like, the first two are just almost structured carbon copies of each other, which is why I find it so funny. They were like, it's so different, it's daring. I'm like, yes and no. I think there's one story that really works, one that sort of kind of works, and the third story doesn't work at all. And what's his name needs to fire his fucking agent, or at least talk to Disney. The guy who played Finn.
Right. Well, it's
what's that actor's name? Daniel.
Orello. What is it?
My apologies, by the way. Not that I think you listen to this podcast.
Right.
You're very good, but his character got so much promise from the start, and then...
Yeah, well, and this goes back to not having a plan. Like, maybe Halloween had a plan and it got screwed up by COVID. I suspect that they didn't. But Disney definitely did not have a plan for their new trilogy, which is a problem. But even their standalones, like Rogue One and Han Solo, I thought were decent. And
awesome. A lot of people love that movie.
Yeah. And I'm a fan of The Mandalorian. And if I'd seen The Mandalorian when I was 12, like, it would have been the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. It would have been like, this is Star Wars. But the response is, like, people are watching it. Obviously, they're making tons of Star Wars. They're not losing any money off of it. But the position seems to be bitch, 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 bitch. And it's difficult for me because, yes, the original trilogy is sacred and kind of untouchable. But the prequel trilogy was terrible. And as much as I have problems with the new Disney trilogy, I don't think they're as terrible as the prequel trilogy. There's this, like, revisionist history going on saying, see, George Lucas had it all figured out. I think that George Lucas, and this is blasphemous, so let's take it, might be one of the single most overrated filmmakers in history.
You did not say Brett Ratner, so sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm talking about rate of praise against the rate of their output, okay?
I think his contribution to the technology of cinema is, well, it's record-breaking, and he's partially responsible for the whole selling of merchandise and getting lots of money that way for the films.
But he's made 3 good movies. 3.
Okay, Star Wars.
THX, Star Wars, and American Graffiti.
Yep.
And the most recent of those was, what, 1975?
Yeah, but George is always, like, he openly admitted he's not a good director, he's more of a producer and writer.
But he's treated like this genius, right?
Yeah.
He's treated like this god, this guy. He created Star Wars. He gave us Star Wars. No, he came up with the idea for Star Wars. A lot of talented, creative people helped to make it into a reality. And this idea that George Lucas can fix it is so asinine to me. Like, we know what his dialogue sounds like, and he's said that he doesn't enjoy directing. He much prefers producing and being in the writing room and having ideas than actually working with actors.
He likes playing with computers, It's the same complaints that a lot of FX directors who get their first directing gig or production designers, that they're good at some of the technical stuff but do not know how to communicate with actors and tell a good story. So, George Lucas is just one of those guys. We can hate him, we can put all the hate on him, but in some ways, he is also partially responsible for Star Wars and Indiana Jones. So
an idea base. He came up with the idea, but then he said Lawrence Kasdan write the script, Steven Spielberg direct the movie.
But he also helped guide the story as well.
For all of them, but like again, he's a pitch man. He's a story guy. He's a good creative person, but he is lauded as being the single most important filmmaker of our or practically any generation, and it grosses me out.
He's up there with the Brat Pack, but would you say that he failed upwards though?
He didn't fail. He succeeded. I just think he's not a filmmaker.
There are stories about other directors who don't show up to set, like Bryan Singer, and he's got a whole list of problems. But Olivia Wilde has faced the same criticism recently when on her second gig she was more interested in being with, she was cheating on her husband with this person than meeting all the meetings and whatnot. It's what got, what's his name, fired from the island of Dr. Moreau.
But again, these people are not treated as if they're the greatest gift to film, and George Lucas is.
Well, like I said, he's also created history among Hollywood, so he does get a bit of that clout because
he does it on the shoulders of others, is my point.
He's a great ideas guy, man.
Sure, and he gets talented people to bring those ideas to the screen. I think he's overrated, is all I'm trying to say. And I think it's a pretty defensible position considering how big the praise goes to Lucas. And I think that because the fan base can't blame Lucas, they can whip on Disney.
Well, they can whip on Lucas, and that's all fair and good, and I think even he would, he even talked about, he did not want to originally direct the first 2 movies. No one would. Like, he asked Brian De Palma, Steven Spielberg, who ghost-directed that last lightsaber duel, by the way. He asked Francis Ford Coppola. They didn't want to touch this because there's a level of such love and intensity that eventually he just gave in, and I honestly think he was starting to get his mojo back. By Sith, it still has a lot of problems, but there are moments where that movie sings.
Well, even the original Star Wars, if you watch the making of, they say his original cut of the movie was unwatchable. The editing room and the adding of James Earl Jones and the changes made after his cut are what turned Star Wars into the property that we know it to be. If his version was released, I don't think Star Wars would be Star Wars to the degree that we see today.
A lot of films get saved in post.
Sure.
I will use the quote from Martin Scorsese saying, if you don't have a sick feeling after watching your cut of the film,
something's wrong.
It's wrong. So a lot of films, like even the stories of The Departed, they were editing and editing and editing and editing and editing the movie almost up to the release date because they had some sequence problems and there was like pacing and everything. It's kind of actually amazing how quickly these movies really go to the wire, and like some of them are saved in the screening process where, you know, they say this works, this doesn't work. So I don't know. I can understand your criticism of Lucas, and I'll even concede that, oh sure, maybe he's been given more praise than he should as a director, but as a filmmaker, he has revolution. Well, he created certain things and made a lot of money for the studios and had a lot of good ideas, like Radioland Murders. He finds talent. He is talented.
He just hasn't made a good movie since the 70s. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, well, fair enough. Yeah, that's true.
Like, the weight of the praise that he gets is unworthy of the output, to my opinion. But I get that this is a minority opinion. And by all means, work behind the scenes, be a movie producer, be an idea man, for sure, for sure. If you know where your gifts are, lean that way. His gifts are not dialogue. His gifts are not directing acting.
Yeah, I think he would even tell you this.
Yeah.
I do love that meeting with the whole like crew and Rick McCallum watching the first cut of Phantom Menace, and they have this sick feeling of each other.
Well, again, that's a fascinating... The making of The Phantom Menace is so much more interesting than the movie itself, because this is a person who is putting everything into the last minute, including the actual script itself, while sets are being built. Like, and he's surrounded by yes men. It's weirdly Trumpian in that, like, he's making something terrible, and the people around him know that he's making something terrible, but nobody will say anything.
Okay, but any filmmaker will tell you that there is a very fine line for, you know, a good idea in a film that starts off and then it goes off the rails for sometimes even reasons beyond control. Like it's
but
hard.
that's not that it was beyond his control is the thing. He waited over 20 years to do these prequels. He had all the time, all the money, and all the resources he could possibly want or use. And what he came out with was the prequel trilogy.
The execution of it, yes, it lent more to the shitty side, but he did get better towards the end.
He had all the time and all the money in the world, and if he was the greatest filmmaker in the world, I don't. Anyway, so going back to the original question, is there a movie that Disney or Lucas or anyone can make that's going to give us that same Star Wars feelings we had as a kid? Because my sort of thesis might be that fans need to let go a little bit in order to meet Disney halfway.
I think Disney has struck more gold than misses, personally. I mean, I think Marvel is obviously their big entity, but I kind of dig, out of the trilogy, the first one, there's lots to like. The second one tries enough interesting things that I really like it, but I understand the criticism. And the third one is just kind of a misguided mess. And that's just because J.J. Abrams knows how to start a story, sometimes just can't quite stick the landing. And he's even admitted to this.
Well, I was talking shit about Lucas. At least Lucas understands the structure of a trilogy in that, you know, there'll be characters that will have an arc through the 3 movies that we will follow. And there will be changes made in their characters and rising and falling of you know, stakes. But all within the same universe, which is established in the first movie, which is sort of brought into like the forefront of high stakes and usually cliffhanger, scary ending for the second one, to the usually crowd-pleasing resolution of the third one, in which the character arcs are all satisfied. I think the new Disney trilogy completely failed in that, and obviously, as I said before, I think the new Halloween trilogy completely failed in that.
Yeah, but it made a shitload of money.
But that was the goal. That was the goal. And again, like, they're going to make money by putting Star Wars on the property. They don't really need to try as hard as I think they have been trying.
Yeah.
Which brings me back to, is the problem the fans? Is the problem Disney? Is it both?
I will say it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you're trying something new, it just won't hit, and then that fans will cry, we want lightsaber fights, we want this, we want that. When, you know, great fantasy, sci-fi, horror films, the ones that change the rules are the ones that stay forever. no one is really going to revisit Rise of Skywalker again. I really don't think so. What's the first of that series again? The Force Awakens?
Yes.
That one will probably have a lot more repeat viewing as long as Halloween Kills with the new trilogy, because it gave us more of the same, and we love that. But we as fans, we need to be challenged, because then we get things like Empire of the Strikes Back, or, you know...
It felt like Force Awakens, people complained it was too the same, right? And then The Last Jedi was too different. And then The Rise of Skywalker, nobody knew what they wanted. Not the filmmakers, not the fans, but it was already in production. I feel bad for some of the cast members who got left out, hung out to dry, or abandoned if they didn't feel the fan response was there. I think... Again, you're going to make your money with the Star Wars product. If you're going to advertise a new trilogy, map out a new trilogy and stick to it. Either film it all at once or just be stubborn about it. Yeah. This is the Star Wars you guys are getting, and deal with it. Don't get freaked out if the fans throw a tantrum, because let's be real, Star Wars fans are going to throw a tantrum no matter what.
Well, there is that, and history will be kind to some of these movies. We both live in a world where we know people that will defend Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Yeah. And I'm sorry, people, that movie is terrible.
And it's not because Michael Myers is not in it. It's just it just doesn't work.
There's just things about the script and the execution that they don't work. Fucking not the hieroglyphics. What's the Stonehenge? Yeah. Enough about the Stonehenge. Anyways.
But I think that you're not going to capture the magic that we felt as kids watching the movie, because we are not kids anymore. Our brains do not attack these movies in the same analytical way. When I was a kid, I wasn't like, how come we can hear explosions in space? Or you know?
But there's also, these stories get recycled and they're universal. You could argue it's the Christ story in a lot of ways, too. Around, like I said, it's more Merlin and King Arthur, but that story has been recycled over and over again, so people do have that connection to it, and always will. I will argue that where Halloween, this new series, dropped the ball is they leaned too much into the soap opera. I loved a lot of the ideas. They were literally taking ideas out of my head, and they put it on the screen. Even the end credit song of Ends with Blue Oyster Cult, Don't Fear the Reaper. I thought, wouldn't this be a good time? It's just that you also forgot that you're making a slasher movie. So,
horror movie fans are virulent too, but I mean, they waded through, Halloween 7 and Halloween Resurrections, and they're still gonna watch. And I believe that is true of Star Wars. But what Halloween doesn't do that Star Wars creators seem to do is listen to the crazy nutcases in the audience saying, more, more, more. Say what you will about Halloween Ends. They made their own strong choices. I think they were wrong choices, but they didn't say this is what the people would want. This is what they would expect. They consciously went in a different, dumb direction. But that's something that Star Wars has learned, that they can't really do that safely.
Yeah, no, I think you're pretty accurate in your statements there. I do, but here's a controversial statement, because where I teach, I mention Star Wars, and 3/4 of the kids have not seen the Holy Trilogy, and have not seen. I do think there's going to be an end date for society in Star Wars. I know there's May the 4th be with you, but I do think at some point it will disappear, and I do think the Halloween movie series will live on, just because the mere fact is every year we will have Halloween.
Well, I want to get excited about Star Wars in the way I used to be, but between the oversaturation that seems to be suddenly happening and just the grossness of the fan reaction, it's almost like the internet revels in its criticism more than it revels in its fandom.
Oh yeah, no. And that's, yes, we are highly critical of society.
Yeah.
It's, it's hard doing art. You can fall flat on your fucking face.
And look, I'm criticizing them too. I'm right there part of it. But I do consider myself a fan. And it's not that I don't have respect for the work that they did. I don't think it's easy to make these types of movies. And the amount of money that they're playing with and the amount of pressure on them to deliver the product must be immense. So, like, I don't default hate the creators of these movies. But I think officially, and this sucks to say, but I do believe it, make your movie and ignore the internet.
Yes. Yep. Yes. Absolutely. Yep. Because we can be our worst enemies. Yeah. I think that is also a fair statement. I will always give a film at least half a point for originality and try something new. Even if you fall flat on your fucking face, I released, like, Southland Tales. Awful movie. A movie that's very hard to decode.
A big swing.
It's a big fucking swing, and it's like, and it's not even so bad like the Room movie or Trolls 2, which I also have deep affection for. Like, I do admire all filmmakers on some capacity, because A, you've done something that I have not done, something that I dream of and probably will not do. Who knows? Anyways, but
there are people who disagree with me, but I feel a certain safety in Disney having Star Wars, in that we may not get fantastic Star Wars, but I don't think we'll get anything worse than the prequel trilogy. I really don't. So if that's our bar, if that's our bottom, or at least it is for me, again, it has its defenders, then I feel like Star Wars is in a safe place. But if Star Wars is in a safe place, I feel like I should be more excited about it. And I'm just not anymore.
Yeah, I do fear, though, because you do talk about oversaturation. We do live in a world where there is now a canceled Star Trek. There was a Star Trek sitcom. Like, they tried it as a comedy show, and it was awful. I do wonder at some point if they'll get that with Star Wars. Like, something that's just too kiddie, too stupid. Like,
it's a huge world. You can have an adventure for the kids on one planet, and you can have a hard, scary adventure for adults on another one. I mean, really, the palette is wide open. They can do anything. But what they're trying to do is please the fans. And my thesis is the fans cannot be pleased.
Yes. But you can do interesting stuff and strike it gold. Like, Rogue One is quote unquote, you know, a man on, like, people on a mission. They used to say man on a mission, like, not quite the Dirty Dozen, but of that ilk.
And it gets the job done.
Yep. But a lot of people like Rogue One, and for that sort of same thing, where it was different, it was darker, it was thrilling.
But still in our world.
Yep. And it had freaking Darth Vader lose his shit at the end. Have you seen the Obi-Wan series, by the way?
I have not.
Do yourself a favor. It almost redeems the trilogy.
Well, I guess I should check it out.
Yeah,
anyway, I think we've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish here.
Okay, we have chit-chatted for half an hour. That's awesome.
Nothing will stand in our way. I will finish what you started.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it. The dark side. The Jedi. They're
I don't think there could have been a bigger hype around a movie than The Force Awakens. It's probably up there with one of the biggest hyped movies of my lifetime. Like, the fervor for it was so big, it just would have been impossible in a lot of ways to live up to the hype. Disney now owns Star Wars, and yes, Disney is just slowly closing its fist over the entire entertainment industry. Soon there'll be nothing that it doesn't have its fingers in. But here we go. What is the new era of Star Wars going to be? And again, I'm trying to say, like, at the time, we're coming off of the backs of the prequels, which I've been very public about not being at all happy with. So, generally speaking, I remember my experience walking out of the theater being quite positive when I first watched it. But, going back to our discussion of Han Solo, it was very safe. I think, like, they knew what they had, they knew it was a cultural phenomenon, and they didn't want to piss off the fan base. So, they had a few ideas, they had a few characters they wanted to introduce, but for the most part, they're going to give us exactly what we want. We're going to give us our full-on Star Wars nostalgia buzz. And it really fed the demon for that. Now, I really liked it at the time it came out, but it's interesting seeing now that some years have gone by, coming back to watch it again. I like that the movie seems to be excited about being a new Star Wars entry in the film. Like, seeing the ruins of all these Star Destroyers and these desert drifts really does sort of spike my imagination and make me think, yeah, there's just all these endless worlds that can be explored in Star Wars. And goody goody, here we are again. We're meeting Rey, Daisy Ridley, this abandoned woman who recovers scrap metals and is, waiting for her family to come back and find her, or waiting for adventure to find her. And of course it does in the form of this adorable BB-8 robot. I have traditionally not been as big a droid fan in the Star Wars universe as a lot of people. Everybody likes C-3PO and R2-D2, especially when we were kids, but it's not the essential ingredient to Star Wars, if you ask me. The whole droid subculture is not as fascinating to me as a lot of other things. But I have to say I am pretty much on board completely with the new BB-8 design, and he's got personality and spunk. He still makes a bunch of noises and squeals just like R2-D2, but he's fully fledged. And he lands in Rey's lap, and she doesn't know what she's got, but of course he has plans or a map within him that will lead to Luke Skywalker, and her life is about to change. We also, of course, introduced to Finn, this John Boyega character, which of all the new things of the new trilogy that I was curious about was to see behind the mask of a stormtrooper for the first time. This is a guy who was raised to kill for the Empire and decides to defect, decides he can't do it. And what is it about this guy? Why is he see something that the rest don't? What made him special? The frustration of the movie is that it doesn't really answer any of those questions. But the rewards of the movie is that it is pretty entertaining. If you've seen Star Wars, which I think everybody has, I think you've kind of seen The Force Awakens. And yes, with each passing rewatch of the movie, that becomes more and more obvious. But I gotta admit, the first time I saw Harrison Ford walk onto the screen, standing next to Chewbacca and saying that he's home on board the Millennium Falcon, I got chills in the theater. I was really happy to see it. I was really happy to be watching a Star Wars movie. And as I'm sorry to spill the beans going forward, as it would turn out, when I left the movie theater here, I was like, now that they've gotten this over with, now I'm really excited to see where they go from here. They've set the table, they've introduced us some characters, they've sparked my interest. But in a lot of ways, it's like a teaser for a meal to come, more than a full meal itself. I like The Force Awakens, but like a lot of the new era Star Wars, I just like it. I don't love it.
I'm really interested. How much are we going to talk about these films, and how much are we going to talk about the trilogy? Because I think that they are two different but intertwined discussions. I am strongly of the belief that the trilogy, the Star Wars sequel trilogy, is less than the sum of its parts. If you were to take the average score of these three movies, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker, and like average them out, that score would be higher than how the trilogy itself came together. Kind of like with Solo, I definitely want to make an appeal to the outside forces of this. And you actually really well summarized it, Larry. I think rebooting Star Wars is an incredibly thankless task. For all of the accusation that J.J. Abrams gets for like, oh, he's not original. This is just a New Hope again. Da 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 da. It is. Like, how do you even begin to make a film like this where it's been 10 years since the last Star Wars with the expectation that Star Wars was never coming back? You need to make something that is. You need to make something that's safe. You have to. You can't whip out Joe Dorowski's Star Wars on the first introduction. You do need to do something that's new, though. This movie is not just a retread. Like we were talking about how safe Solo is. This movie is, maybe it's not any more or less safe than Solo, but I do think it is more experimental. Seeing behind the mask of a stormtrooper, seeing a dark side person who is guilt-ridden and wants to be a good person, seeing the death of a major trilogy character. Maybe that's safe, maybe that's not, but these are new ideas for Star Wars, while also letting old fans know that it is safe to come into the fold. We're not going to rock the boat, and introducing new people to what Star Wars is. I think that's the piece that gets overlooked when you're figuring out this formula of what is The Force Awakens, because you need to be close enough to Star Wars that if someone new, and I've talked to several people who their introduction to Star Wars was this movie, someone new can watch this and get what Star Wars is about. And I think that needle got threaded fucking perfectly. I think that there are some elements of this that are less inspired. I'm not a huge fan that there's another Death Star, but I also think that for the people, everyone loved this movie when it came out. I think that it was only later on, and especially I feel like in retrospect after the backlash of The Last Jedi, that people started really digging into it. I'm worried about this trend that I would say of the internet. It becomes an echo chamber where everyone kind of settles on their talking points, and then that becomes the opinion of a movie. And there's also this trend that I see where people will do what I would call like driver test reviews, where it's like, okay, you did really good with introducing stormtroopers, the music was great, this was great, the cinematography was good, but you did have another Death Star, so I can't give you your license as a good movie. This whole movie sucks because of blank, blank flaw. People that hate plot holes are like this, where they'll get really fixated on, why didn't the Eagles fly them to Mordor? And I don't think that is a fair way to review a movie. And when you remove that kind of thinking, I think The Force Awakens is a fucking amazing film. Like a legitimate, I was enthusiastic about Solo, and I really want to differentiate that I think this is a legitimately great movie, whereas I think that Solo was more well done than people give it credit for. I think that the characters in this movie are interesting, and they are new. And I think that the scenario set up in this movie, while there is very familiar trappings, they are interesting, and they are new, and they are emotionally involved in a way that isn't necessary in order to make a safe Star Wars film. I absolutely love the character of Kylo Ren, and I love where he goes later on in this trilogy. I enjoy, and I'm sad that we didn't see more of Finn, the stormtrooper who's disillusioned with being in the First Order. Rey, yeah, she grows up on a desert planet, but it is interesting to see a new let's say category of character. We've had smugglers, we've had Sith and Jedi, but Scavengers is a new one, and it involves an entirely different culture that we get to see on Jakku, a completely different ecosystem. There is a lot about this movie that works really well, and I love The Force Awakens. When it first came out, I made the argument that it only needed to be the 4th best Star Wars movie to be a success, and I think it absolutely cleared that hurdle. What do you think, Ashley? Or, sorry, Larry, you're the host. What do you think Ashley thinks?
The Force Awakens is the most Star Wars in any one movie that has ever been put together thus far. The approach to introducing new characters cleanly and seamlessly, and in a way then merging those new characters, like for Rey. Rey's first scene, we see what she does for a living. We see that she is self-reliant and tough and playful, all in that first little segment where she's scavenging the crashed Star Destroyer and then toboggan down that hill. And I love her instantly for that. Poe is immediately.
Oscar Isaac is charming dude.
It's a charming incarnate. Kylo Ren is humorless and stoic, and the way he freezes that first blaster bolt, you know that you are dealing with something special here. Yeah. And the whole movie, you were dealing with something so special, and it really shows. There's an attention to the detail in all of the set designs and all of the prop designs and all of the costuming, but in the writing and in the chemistry between the actors, that within the first 20 minutes, I am back in the world of Star Wars, and I am ready to advance. And we end up on the Millennium Falcon with Han Solo, wrapping it all, both the old trilogy, but handing off cleanly to, at the time, just looking at this, but handing off really cleanly to the new trilogy. And, it is fast-paced, and it is fun. And the only thing that looks a little bit bad, what is this, 6 years later, is the Rathtars. But the sequence functions so well to instantly endear Rey to Han, which more endears Rey to the audience, to me as the audience at any rate. Yeah. And by the end, I am so ready to continue this journey with these new people who I have fallen in love with over the last 2 hours. I cannot believe how well this movie turned out.
Well, I was maybe skeptical is not the right word, but when it came down, J.J. Abrams is directing it. And, he'd said that Star Wars was his dream property to direct for a long time. But he'd already done Star Trek. And his approach...
I think the first sentence... He did already do Star Wars in that first Star Trek.
That's exactly what I'm saying. He basically made his Star Wars movies already and just inserted into a Star Trek environment. So what was he going to do here to sort of up the game? I like Rey. She's kind of like a spunkier, more energetic female, less whiny Luke Skywalker, but that's the role she's playing, right? And Oscar Isaac, Poe, is very Han Solo-y, although he's much more in the Rebels. He doesn't have that sort of edge, the Han Solo edge. He's definitely one of the good boys. But, I don't know, Snoke is so clearly the Emperor Palpatine, and the New Order is so clearly the Empire. And, our characters are going to be led into this not Death Star with this old haggard hero mentor figure, and he's going to die in front of them. And this is the first Star Wars movie. This is A New Hope entirely, to a point where it's copy paste to the annoying thing that George Lucas talked about behind the scenes with the prequels, that he felt the need to make all the movies fucking rhyme. I gave it a pass in this movie because it took any surprise out of the movie. I think that it had been spoiled to me what was going to happen with Han, but I'd like to think even if it hadn't been spoiled for me, if I'd been paying a little bit of attention, I knew what was going to be happening at the end of the movie. To me, what's the fun about the movie is, like you say, the passing of the baton from the older generation of Star Wars to a younger, new generation of Star Wars, and the hope and excitement that sort of engendered. I love that one of the first people we see in the movie is Max von Sydow. To me, right away, I was like, well, there's a good sign right out the doorway right here. But what they lacked in newness, they made up for in character and energy. I really like the character of Poe. I really like the character of Finn. It sets the table really well for what's going forward. But my fever of excitement was it sounds like it was a lot less than Ashley's and somewhat less than Erich's. But what made me wonder, okay, now that we have this, where do we go from here? For me, the most MVP player of the entire series is Adam Driver as Kylo Ren. Yes. Because here's a character that I is intensely problematic for me. We didn't want the son of Princess Leia and Han Solo to be a villain. And he's a villain. And at the end of this movie, spoilers, kids, but that's why we have the warning, he kills Han Solo. Han Solo dies. And as a Star Wars fan, that's a pretty fucking big deal. And the movie very clearly, to me, would want to be a redemption story for the Kylo Ren character. And for me as a Star Wars fan, there is no redemption. There is no fucking coming back from killing Han Solo. Fuck you, Kylo Ren. And the only reason we get there a little bit is because Adam Driver is an amazing actor. But what I see in this movie, and again, I guess I'm finishing where I started, is the exciting potential of what new Star Wars could be. And it really whet my appetite and said, all right, Disney, well done. What else you got? But it didn't pass that point for me. I was trying to get my boys really excited about Star Wars, and in a weird way, I felt like I was dragging them to it. And this is the best points I can give for the experience of the movie. My boys were indifferent to Star Wars when they entered the theater, and they left super stoked for the next one. So they had to have been doing something right.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said about Force Awakens, but I could go into each scene and what I appreciate from it and what I don't. I'm not going to argue that there being another Death Star was a good idea, and if I could change one thing about the movie, that would probably be it. But again, I think that introducing a whole generation to the concepts of Star Wars, including big super weapons, including Death Star trench runs, it's tough. And I think maybe JJ was just the right guy for the job. I do think that it is a more inspired movie than it seems like at first glance. I do think that it has more of its own ideas that are just wrapped in the trappings of original trilogy content than it would seem at first glance. And much like with Solo, the more I watch Force Awakens, the more I think that it stands on its own merit outside of what conventional wisdom would dictate.
Well, and I do want to give points to John Boyega. Whatever I can say about Finn the character, John Boyega the actor, the performer, absolutely brings it here. He sort of introduces us to the world and brings us into the new era of Star Wars, and I think he does so really well. But I also think it's telling that he's kind of one of the main characters outside of Rey, and we've barely talked about him.
Did he do any? Was it Attack the Block and then he was in this? Or do you know if he did any projects in between? That's a big jump. That's a really big jump. I could talk about Finn for a really long time. Actually, I will. No, we haven't mentioned him. We're kind of glossing over the bigger picture of this movie. I do think that he is, I don't necessarily agree that like Rey is just another Luke Skywalker. I think that the more you try and do like a Venn diagram, the less you'll find that they actually overlap. It's just that she ends up being the Jedi character. And if we can't have someone end up being the Jedi character, what are we doing with reintroducing Star Wars? I will say,
But by that, do you
John
mean,
Boyd,
Eric, though? Sorry to cut in here, but by that, do you mean she initially has no awareness that she has any force powers at all, and by the end of the movie, she has whatever force powers she needs in any given scene to get what she needs done? Because that trajectory, I'm sorry, is absolutely identical.
That's very similar, but personality-wise, I think they're very different.
Right.
I think if Rey
She's
is
not whiny.
like anyone, she's not. She's somewhat idealistic, but she's very tough and very take care of herself. If she's similar to any of the original trilogy characters in terms of character, she's most like Leia.
Right.
yeah, that's not, and honestly, Han a little bit. It's an interesting blend. I will say, like, I'm gonna get back to Finn. You can't get me off track, but I will say for Rey, there is a lot of criticism about like, oh, she doesn't know she has the Force, and then all of a sudden she's throwing lightsabers around and doing Jedi mind tricks. But for each one of her Force power discovery, like she does not know she has the Force other than some like intuition things about which buttons to press during the Rathtar scene and stuff like that. She's introduced to the concept of the Force when she touches the Skywalker saber, and Maz Kanata kind of walks her through that. She is introduced then to the idea that the Force can be the path to like mind tricks, because in the interrogation scene with Kylo Ren, it's very subtly done. It's mostly done through the sound design, but Kylo Ren does like the mental probing of her, where he goes through and he pulls out her dreams she's having of this island that it turns out that Luke's on and stuff. And you can hear the sound design, and she is experiencing that. And then there is a moment where it flips and she starts doing to him what he is doing to her. And she taps into that like Force energy, and then she reads into his mind, which catches him off guard. But she's learning from him. And that is the thing that she uses when she does the mind trick on the guards. You can hear the same sound design. Where she's trying it. She knows that she has the power to go into people's minds because she just did it to Kylo Ren because he just showed her how to do it. Similarly, at the end with the lightsaber, like she did not know you could move things with the Force until Kylo Ren threw her at a tree using the Force. Similarly, like it's really interesting because I guess we have Vader Force choking someone in a... Go ahead.
And in the end of their duel, I don't think that she realizes that she's using the Force to fight him until he tells her that you need a teacher. I can show you the ways of the Force. And that's when she realizes that that's something that she can really...
She could do the spider sense thing of having it just kind of make her a ninja. In terms of like Force development, in A New Hope, we have Darth Vader Force choking a person, and that's kind of the only hint we get at Force telekinesis. Otherwise, it's just like it's enhanced instincts, and it lets you talk to Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Ghost. The Empire Strikes Back, when Luke is in the Wampa's cave, that is the first time, and I believe that's the first time for Luke, that we see someone pull something to them. Like the quintessential Force power wasn't introduced until the second movie. And I think that there is a lot of gray area about what the Force can do or not. It's like you said, like it's basically magic. The Emperor being able to shoot lightning out of his fingers, I don't think that's contiguous with what we had seen of the Force until Return of the Jedi. And I will say, like, Kylo Ren stopping a blaster bolt with the Force, I think makes more sense as a Force power than Darth Vader being able to absorb Han shooting at him through his glove. That, I don't know, he can do it. It was done in The Empire Strikes Back, but the boundaries of the Force are very malleable, and it's very malleable. And so with that in mind, I do think this movie does do an adequate job of establishing parameters with which the characters learn their Force. Specifically Rey, where she learns her Force abilities. Finn is a character that we had not seen in a Star Wars movie, in that his motivations are inherently selfish but purely understandable, where he is trying to escape the First Order. He is done being a Nazi. The brainwashing didn't take, and he has a driving fear of he just needs to escape them. And that is throughout the movie. His absolute driving force. And I think it is unique to Star Wars to that point. Like, we've not seen someone trying to get away. Like, we haven't seen The Fugitive in Star Wars to the past. And it leads to one of my favorite moments in the movie, which is on Takanada, Maz Kanata's planet, where there's the bar and the first kind of skirmish between TIE fighters and X-Wings. Kylo Ren finds Rey. She tries to shoot him with a gun. It doesn't mean anything to him because he's a fucking Jedi. He captures Rey and walks away with her. And we have... This is a credit to, I think, the writing, the direction, and definitely to John Boyega. John Boyega's trying, like, he's fighting his way through the stormtroopers. He's trying to find Rey. He sees Kylo Ren has her, and he gives everything to run after her. And I think it's such an underrated moment because it is him overcoming all of his fear and his anxiety and his main goal to complete his character development, where he cares more about someone else than himself, enough that he runs after, and Kylo Ren must scare him shitless given what he's been through. And it does not matter because at this point, he is a different person than at the beginning of this movie, such that he will ostensibly sacrifice himself to try and help his friend.
So it's almost like in Star Wars when Han Solo was just in it for the money, but at the last minute he realized that he cared about these people and that he couldn't abandon them in their time of need.
But Han Solo was not deathly allergic to Imperials. I think that's the bigger difference, is that it's like if, I don't know, like it's like overcoming a phobia almost. Like there's this mental barrier that Finn has had with the trauma he's had from the First Order that he overcomes to go help his friend, which I think
in him says run, and the movie makes him not run. No, I absolutely get it. I want to not go over a half an hour on any of these reviews if I can help it. Ashley, is there something more that you'd like to say? I feel like we've been giving you the short end here.
I guess not. I'll look back anything that I guess if
anything comes to mind. Look, I just wanted
later movies, but
yeah, it's tricky. There's just so much potential here, and I just wanted to mention really quickly, like, one of the things that they could have used and didn't about the movie. The scene that we keep on going back to, the Rathtars. These bounty hunters who come and they have it in for Han Solo. All of those guys were from this movie called The Raid and The Raid Redemption. They're these amazing martial arts performers. And somebody in Star Wars saw that movie and said, we need to get these guys to be in our Star Wars movie. And they spared no expense and they got them. And they did nothing with them. Now, I'm still happy to see them, and it's still fun that they're in the movie. But in the weird way that it's emblematic of a lot of the stuff about the Disney-era Star Wars is, like, they spare no expense. They do the best that they can to give you what they think is Star Wars, but they're not necessarily using these people for their best abilities. I think that's the problem with Finn. The idea of Finn as a character is great, but we don't really get that. Especially going forward. Whatever we were going to get out of Finn, I feel like we got it from this movie.
And this goes back to what I'm saying about the trilogy versus the movies.
I suppose. And we're going to move on to the next chapter. But I think that what I didn't expect about The Force Awakens, which ends up holding true, is that really nothing changes for our characters in these arcs moving forward. The Rey we meet today is the Rey we get for the rest. The Poe we met today is the Poe we get for the rest. The Finn we get, well, we'll discuss. But yeah, I think we should move on to the next movie. Okay.
When I found you, I saw raw, untamed power. And beyond that, something truly special.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
I've seen this raw strength only once before. It didn't scare me enough then. It does now. Let the past die. Kill it. If you have to. That's the only way to become what you were meant to be.
So probably the most controversial of the Disney era Star Wars movies, I think we can say, is The Last Jedi. If there's a movie that has caused the most amount of conflict and ire and difference of opinion amongst the spectrum with the fans, it's got to be The Last Jedi. Rian Johnson is now the director. Rian Johnson's done some interesting movies before this, like Brick, like Looper. It's interesting choice. And again, I say this again and again, like, I like the choices you're making. I'm not sure why you got this guy, but I like him, and way to go. And they basically said, make your movie. And he looked at The Force Awakens, and I've talked about it in the past as being analogous to being a not great improv partner. When you're doing an improvised scene, as we know, Ashley, usually you try to be receptive to what you're given. So if someone says, I'm sick of all this rain, you don't say, what are you talking about? It's not raining. That might be quote unquote funny, but it's a block. You're blocking your partner, right? Rian Johnson is a great filmmaker, and he's a great sci-fi filmmaker, but he is not a good improv partner. Almost everything set up by The Force Awakens is either ignored or has the door harshly slammed on it. And not only does the movie believe that this is the path to being brave and this is how to move forward with Star Wars, it keeps complimenting itself for it throughout the movie with the themes of you have to destroy the past to create the future. Which weirdly seems more like the attitude that the Empire would have than the Jedis. But here's the thing I will say about Rian Johnson. This took balls, okay? All of these questions we wanted to know. Who is Finn? Why did he come to this point where he needed to make this change and escape from the Empire? No, we're not going to learn about that at all, okay? Why do you, or what was the point of Snoke? Who is Snoke? I remember people were speculating in the first movie because we only see this holographic image of him. Maybe it's going to turn out that he's small and diminutive like Yoda or something. What's the deal with Snoke? He can't just be another Emperor. Well, that storyline is going to dead end very abruptly, right? It just, in the effort to make this movie the most different, innovative, risk-taking Star Wars it could be, it kind of became so different that it doesn't feel connected to the previous movie. And in the overcorrection moving forward, the subsequent movie doesn't feel connected to this movie either. This sort of feels like a complete, separate, different, depending on who you ask, failed or not failed experiment. As a theatrical experience, as a theatrical entertaining experience, controversially, I will say this was the most fun I've had in a Star Wars movie. Because I had no idea what I was going to see scene for scene. I was absolutely at a loss. Unlike Force Awakens, where I basically knew the whole movie within the first 20 minutes of the movie, this movie, what? What is happening? I don't know. I'm completely at a loss. And there's a scene late in the movie, and I'm sitting next to my sons, where the Empire says, I want every gun we have at that man, at Luke Skywalker. And my son was so excited, over the roof, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen, that I just couldn't not feel that with him. There's a lot of problems in The Last Jedi, and I do think it does almost consciously undo some of the work that was done in the first movie. And And I do think the entire B storyline, and so I'm trying to find the name of the actress, John Boyega and Kelly Mary Tran, Rose Tico. The whole B story with those two characters and the gambling planet and their mulligan chasing, like that entire B plot of the movie is garbage. Like, you could remove all of it and it doesn't progress the story. We don't learn anything. I mean, we know that Rose really likes him and that they've got this dynamic between the two of them. But as far as serving the story, as far as learning anything about Finn, as far as us contributing to the narrative of The Last Jedi, your entire B plot is, to my mind, useless. But I had a lot of fun with the A plot. I know that people really have strong feelings about The Last Jedi. I am entertained by it, but I think it's almost a confusion of, like, wrong-headed ideas next to really smart ideas. And that does make it a messy, kind of entertaining, holy shit watch. But it sort of tipped the hand that Disney didn't have a plan with this trilogy. And you approach a trilogy differently than you approach a movie. There's a goal, there's an arc, there's things to be set up and knocked down. And this movie tells us, sorry guys, we have Star Wars, but we don't have a plan. That is where I start with The Last Jedi.
I guess you've really set me up for success because, like, I'll appease some people if I really like it, and I'll appease some people if I really hate it. The Last Jedi... The issue is that almost more than any other movie, maybe Rogue One, in this set, it has such high highs and such low lows. I think that there is some of, like, weirdly, and I'm going to stand by this, some of the best writing in Star Wars surrounding some of that A-plot stuff. There is also very, very baffling decisions, and I'm going to try and really keep my summary short so we can talk about the movie itself. But I do think that this is, you nailed it. Like, this is emblematic of, like, the beginnings of the issue of the trilogy, even if the movie itself doesn't succumb to the flaws as harshly given, looking at it as its own thing. I think this movie would stand the test of time a little bit better for the parts that don't work if the next movie honored it in the way that it did not honor The Force Awakens. By the time we get to Rise of Skywalker, I'm sure we're going to talk about the absolute zigzagging of tone and direction and all of that stuff. I think that what I'll say for The Last Jedi is that I think it very successfully introduces some daring new ideas, and I think it introduces those more successfully than it fails at the parts that fall on their face. Ashley, what do you think?
I think that The Last Jedi is excellent.
Oh.
As someone who admittedly, I watch Star Wars for the Jedi plot lines and the
Jedi plot lines and what? Sorry, you froze.
A lot of so that A plot in this movie for me is just bang on, just beautiful exploration of the Force and what to be disgruntled in the Force and what it is to be discovering it. And the major misstep in the B plot is, I think that really breaks a lot of the suspension of disbelief of Finn and Rose getting to Cantabite, having this whole adventure.
I'm sorry, Ashley, you cut out there.
Getting on.
I apologize. You cut out there. The greatest flaw in the B plot was, sorry? You cut off.
Is that they specify the timeline that is taking place during. I think without that, it would be a lot easier to suspend your belief that Finn and Rose go whole side quest and meet up back up with the rebels and try and infiltrate the Star Destroyer. But I do think that all of the characters, they have smaller arcs in this movie, but they do have arcs. Rey becomes more unstable in being a purely light side being. Kylo Ren becomes more unstable in his place in the dark side, even though he does rise to be supreme leader. Poe learns about leadership, and I think the end of this movie really set him up to be in charge of the rebellion going forward. And I think that Finn actually does grow from being someone who's, who at the end of The Force Awakens was willing to risk himself for one person, to be someone who is willing to risk himself for a group, for an idea, where he wouldn't have before.
Well, and at least this time he's volunteering, He wasn't stolen as a child and forced into this machine of the Empire or the New Order. I have a real hard time not calling it the Empire for some reason.
Oh, yeah, I will, I agree with all of that. I do think it's unfortunate that the beginning and the end of Finn's stuff, I think, is clear, and I'd even say fairly well handled. But the getting there, the actual arc itself, I think is a little bit muddled. I almost feel like, for as much as everyone hates Canto Bight, I almost feel like the B plot taking place entirely on Canto Bight, for whatever reason, would have maybe been better. I think any kind of focus would have improved it, because the point that the gambling planet is trying to make is that there are people, it's about war profiteering, which is a concept not really explored in Star Wars before, which is interesting. But I think that the issue is Rose is hey, Finn, you can't escape. You need to go do this B plot. Finn is this place is cool. Keep in mind, I've been an ex-stormtrooper for about 3 days, and I've never seen anything like this. This is cool. And then she's but they really beat the dog horses, and that's not great. For the people there, I get, you can say that they're war profiteers, but we never see them do anything other than enjoying their vacation. And I wouldn't want someone to run a pile of horses during my stay at Vegas. And so by the end of it, they say the things that would satisfy the plot points for this is an arc. But I don't think we see the stuff, which is why Canto Bight doesn't land as much for me. As well, since we're talking about it, the effects on them riding the fog ears out through everything is awful. And it's really baffling to me, because there's some things you can't correct for in a movie, no matter how much money you have, but effects is not one of them. And I think that Rose and Finn look kind of terrible riding on, they look like they're green screened while riding a mechanical bull. And someone should have looked at that and either cut to them less, spent $1 million to make it look better or whatever, but it feels very low budget for a Star Wars movie.
Honestly, I have to say, every time we cut to Rose, Finn, or Benicio del Toro, my interest in the movie just dropped. And it didn't pay off even. I might have, if it was all rewarded at the end and there was a point to their whole thing. And even to the end, when Finn goes to sacrifice himself, but Rose can't let him do it, I was conflicted about that, too. Was that the right thing to do, Rose? And was that the right thing for your character to do? And what did that mean going forward? Again, I don't feel like any of these questions are asked or answered in a proper way. What I do connect with is Poe's story and his sort of clash with Laura Dern's character, Vice Admiral Holdo. It was real problem is all she has to do to have Poe on her side is keep him in the fucking loop, right? That's all he's asking for. But she's going to do it her way, and that's the way it's got to be. And in spite of the fact of him, having an armed insurrection, she never loses respect for him. And that's entertaining, but it's not credible. It's one of these problems that just could be solved with a conversation, but the movie never does it. That said, I love the performance of Poe. I love his character, how he can't stand that they're doing the wrong thing, and he's good. If this is what it takes to get things done, this is what it takes to get things done. And I respect that. Another controversial thing that I have to bring up with our Star Wars nerds. Admiral Akbar is unceremoniously sucked into the vacuum of space. Good idea, bad idea? Is your sound off, Ashley?
Yeah, I want to say real quickly, since we're talking, before moving off from Poe, I will say, there are several moments in this movie where I'm the movie had the answer to make this better. Laura Dern, or Holdo and Poe is definitely one of those things where Like, there is a reason for her to not trust Poe. That is, they are not, the fleet is being tracked through lightspeed, which is a concept which I guess is new in Star Wars. The idea is that if they don't watch you go to lightspeed, you're home free or whatever. And so, like, Holdo should just be like, hey, we might have a mole. We don't know what's going on. I'm keeping everyone at arm's length. And that would be an interesting plotline, even if they don't have a mole, just like approaching that idea. I always liked the notion before, I don't know why, but while I watched the movie the first time, I thought that there was going to be more payoff to this lightspeed tracking thing other than they literally invented a lightspeed tracker in the ship. My idea was always like, it would be neat if they were tracking the little beacon that Leia has for Rey. I think that would be a cool, like, betrayal of the good guys doing the right thing. I think that would be a neat story movie, but they don't do that. There isn't a mole. There isn't any payoff to trying to slow them down. There isn't any consequences to Benicio del Toro's character betraying them. There's nothing. Also, like, what is it with they go to this planet to find a code breaker to hack into what should be the most secured thing in the galaxy, and they don't find it, but they wind up in the same cell as the next guy who's as good or better. It's like, I guess code breakers. Yeah, code breakers. They're just a dime a dozen. You go through a cantina, there's going to be a smuggler and a dark side and a code breaker. They're just everywhere.
But that is the B plot, and like I said, I hated that. The A plot works, and it does have a payoff as far as I'm concerned in one of the most epic explosions in Star Wars history.
Yes.
But I still have to go back, I'm sorry, to Admiral Akbar.
Yeah,
that hurt my feelings a little bit. I have to admit, that hurt my feelings a little bit. Not that he died, but how he died. I think it should have mattered more.
It was a plot point to get them to have this new character be in charge. Which, let's talk about Akbar, and then let's talk about how Leia is alive and Akbar isn't. Ashley, what do you think about Akbar?
If they could have seen into the future, that would not have been the case, right?
Yeah. I'm pretty neutral about Akbar.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. But if anything, it does sort of go. It is our old established characters, as long as they're not too important. Yeah.
I mean, he's most famously known for saying it's a trap. I get that he's not a big important character. I just feel like if you're going to do that to the fans, if you're going to kill a, quote, fan favorite character, it should count for something. And I just kind of felt like, oh, let's kill Admiral Akbar. That's as much thought as went into it, it seems like.
I think that the way you do it is the way that Han died, where it plays a service to the greater story. And we'll dive into the A-plot at some point shortly, it seems. But Han Solo dying, like, meant a lot for the character of Kylo Ren. Whether you like that or not because you like Han more than you like Kylo, that is what it is. But Akbar died for nothing. He died so that someone could say, like, okay, for all you fanboys that would say Akbar should be in charge, he can't be. He's dead. That's why Holdo's in charge.
Problematic as it may be with them killing Snoke, at least it was, like, shocking, and it was like, okay, now where are we going? It meant something.
A fucking amazing sequence.
Yeah.
So, like, Leia in space is such a bad moment. It was watching it in theaters. It was the first time I had a pit in my stomach where I was like, oh shit, this might be a bad movie. I don't ultimately think that The Last Jedi is a bad movie. But watching, like, it's shot poorly. I think it was the wrong choice, just like in terms of in the script of like, oh, Leia's sucked into space, but then she comes back, don't worry. I think that I guess I'm trying not to talk about Kylo Ren and Rey because I think we're about to talk about them dedicated, but it's a great moment of Kylo Ren has a bunch of anger. Snoke just gave him a tongue lashing, and he's going to go take it out on the rebels in his ship. And then he tells through the Force, like, hey...
Because his mom's there.
Because his mom is there, and he's not just a jaded dark side person. He's conflicted, and he can't ultimately shoot her. And then someone else does. And that moment isn't allowed to land because instead we have this really... She might as well have been purely digital. I think there is some plate shooting and some Carrie Fisher footage in it, but it's basically you're in space. There's no sense of direction, really. Carrie Fisher's floating. She's been in space for a while. Leia should be dead, but it's Star Wars, so whatever. And she force pulls herself into the ship, which is... I'll talk about this a little bit in the next movie. Jedi self-propelling with the Force, for whatever reason, is a bridge too far for me, because otherwise, why don't they just fly everywhere? And this is essentially what she's
when
doing.
You say that the Force is fake. I don't know what I can't help you with that.
Yeah, but aside from that, it looks awful. It looks like corny and cheesy and gross. Yeah. And the music treats it like it's such a big moment, and I hate it.
Well, and that's what I'm talking about, the experience of the movie. Like, when I'm watching the movie, I could never have predicted that was going to happen. And I didn't like that it was going to happen, but what next? Like, after Space Leia, like, what are we going to see next? And in a weird way, that was the strange appeal of the movie. I have a theory about the movie, and yes, we do need to get into Rey and Kylo, but we'll get there. I have a theory
Luke Skywalker.
that a lot of Star Wars fans lost this movie the second Luke flipped the lightsaber over his shoulder. There's a bunch of people who was like, that is not the reaction we wanted. We don't like this movie. And that was it. Right? I can appreciate that I don't like all the decisions made, but that they made big swings. They were maybe not the right swings, maybe they weren't the right move, but it was ambitious. They were trying some shit. And that, whether successful or not, is the thing that I do respect about The Last Jedi. Now, do we want a romance between Rey and Kylo Ren?
Yes, we do.
Fuck yes!
See, I guess I'm alone on that, because I don't. I've never wanted that, and it's sort of like, I don't know, like Clarice Starling and Hannibal Lecter. To me, they are not supposed to get together and make babies. They're enemies. And it's just not the thing I wanted. And it's sort of a lot of this, because Daisy Ridley plays Rey so strong. The fact that she can't think straight because she has a Force vision of him without a shirt, I don't know, it kind of pissed me off. It was like, it made her such a girl all of a sudden.
Hates that happens. No, she's not, like, she's still determined. She's still convinced that she's the one who is right, and he needs to change and get on her side. And if he can do that, then they can be together. And he is just as determined. If she can change and get on his side, then they can be together. And that is determined. And it is a beautiful tug of war where they are so connected that they can't let go. But they are so conflicted that they can't be together.
He killed Han Solo.
Han Solo sacrificed himself to implant the conflict so that he could possibly be redeemed.
If she ended up hooking up with Kylo Ren, she could never look Chewie in the eye for the rest of her life, damn it.
Why not? Kylo Ren is Han Solo's kid. Like, he killed Han Solo, sure, and Chewie clearly, because Chewie shot him, he clearly likes Han more than he loves Ben. But
Chewie did.
Sorry for the interruption, but Ashley was about to say that Chewie did try to kill Kylo Ren, or shot him, but not mortally. And he seemed to be in a position where he could have, so maybe Chewie couldn't bear to even himself kill Han Solo's son, even after witnessing what had happened.
And I'm also going to use this moment to apologize for Ashley and to Ashley for the quality of her audio being a little bit spotty in this review. I'm really sorry. I don't know what happened. I know you sound like a forced projection, but I do think it does kind of even out, and it is listenable in the end of it. But yeah, there's some weird choppiness, and the volume's in and out, and you cut out a few times. But I'm doing the best I can. So yes, big thanks, big love to Ashley and Eric for being here.
And yes, we were talking about Chewie shooting and not mortally wounding his enemy instead of when he seemed to have the opportunity to do so. So that's where we are. My bad.
That's his dog.
You don't think he was trying to kill him? Really?
No.
I think it was a reaction. I wouldn't say definitively one way or another, but it definitely looks like a reaction coming out of pain. One thing I'll say vis-a-vis Rey and Kylo Ren falling, or at least like crushing on each other a little bit. Something that actually Ashley pointed out to me in The Force Awakens. It's a very subtle thing, but when Rey and Kylo are standing off in the forest and he's trying to pull the lightsaber himself and it wisps past him and Rey catches it, he turns around and he gives her a look, and he looks like a little into it. Like, he gives a really small smile, like, oh yeah, this is gonna be interesting. Like, he is intrigued by Rey for the first time. And I think that The Last Jedi, the best thing that it does is play off that dynamic. And I think that, like, yeah, Kylo Ren killed Han, and it upsets Rey. She is very torn about it at the beginning. But what this does, and this is, you're talking about being a good scene partner, this is being a great scene partner with the setup of The Force Awakens, because we now need to see, why is Kylo not a good guy? Like, it's not a good thing to kill Han and, like, murder a bunch of villagers to try and find a map to Luke Skywalker. But he is not the Emperor. He is not even Darth Vader in the first few movies. He has conflict within him.
But that's who he wants to be. Especially in The Force Awakens, he's this petulant child. I want to be Darth Vader, and it's not going to be cool until I am, damn it. Right? He's kind of like almost adorably, like, childish in his... He's got all this power.
Exactly! He's adorably, ineffectively evil.
Yeah, but... Again, I don't see the appeal of that.
The appeal is that, like, what Force Awakens does is it adds the motivation, I guess I would say. Rey is like, oh, why did you kill Han? Why did you hate him? And Kylo Ren is like, I didn't hate him. That wasn't the point. I needed to kill him because of, like, the dark side school stuff, but I didn't hate my dad, and that's why killing him was tough for me, and that's why it was important to do. There's also, like, oh, why are you part of the dark side at all? And we get this really good stuff with seeing his perspective of how the night went when he turned fully dark, and Luke's perspective and his perspective, and going back and forth, and adding those layers is the best thing that The Last Jedi does. And I think
kind of makes the evil Luke's fault instead of Kylo's fault, right?
But it's not. It's both of them, and that's the point of bouncing back and forth.
It's everyone's fault.
It's no one and everyone's fault.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's the way to handle it. Because, like, what's the other justification for Kylo Ren killing... Like, why did Anakin kill all the younglings? I don't know, and I'll never know, because it makes no sense. Like, if you're... the prequels aren't well done. Why would Kylo Ren kill everyone? Because he is afraid for his own life and thinks that they're out to get him for the stuff that he's experimenting with. And there's some comics that go into, like, a deeper level with this, but I think the film works on its own of he is motivated genuinely for his positions. And that's a thing that has been missing from almost any dark side character in Star Wars thus far. And Rey gets the privilege, Rey has the benefit of seeing that, and that is where the dynamic comes from. And it's like Ashley says, they're into each other, and they're convinced that the other one needs to come to their side. But that pull is an interesting character, is interesting in terms of the characters being motivated, and it is fun to watch. And it leads to one of the coolest scenes in Star Wars, which is Kylo Ren kills Snoke, and then they fight those guards in that throne room, and that is rad as fuck.
Well, again, I like the killing of Snoke as it was a shocking moment, but I didn't like it as in that it was further sort of solidification as that, no, they don't have a plaster man here at all, right? They're just making it up as they go. And that's good or bad, but I think that would have helped them out in the going forward in the trilogy. There are certain things that they had to deal with in the next film that they had no choice. They had some course correction that they had to do as far as Carrie Fisher dying and stuff like that they just had to deal with, and that was a problem that was outside that they had to deal with. A lot of the other problems that they deal with, they created themselves, and for good or bad, they were created by The Last Jedi.
We have to talk about Luke.
We have to talk about sassy, grumpy, drama queen. Entirely makes sense based on Return of the Jedi. Enigmatic fucking Luke Skywalker. I love him.
Mark Hamill, by the way, such a better actor today than he was when he played Luke Skywalker in the original trilogy.
Mark Hamill severely underrated actor when he played Luke Skywalker in the original
think
trilogy.
so?
We all love and accept Yoda as a real... Yoda does not work without standing on the magnificent shoulders of Mark.
I get it, Ashley. He's dreamy, but I think he was the weakest actor in the original trilogy, and I think he's one of the stronger actors in the new trilogy.
Which he literally
he's
did.
had an arc as a career. He was cast like I guess it was famously the same casting session that Brian De Palma was doing for Carrie, and the same casting session that was the cute boy that everyone wanted to go to the prom with was the same casting that they were looking for Luke Skywalker. They were casting the prettiest star that they could find. And they would have, Harrison Ford and Alec Guinness fill out the acting roles. That's what it felt like. I'm sorry if I'm hurting your feelings there, Ashley.
I think you're wrong, but we can disagree.
That's allowed. I like bitter, angry, green milk drinking Luke too. Like, I didn't have a problem with it necessarily. Whether or not it's what you wanted from the series, it wasn't expected. And again, it was one of the wonky things about The Last Jedi. I didn't expect him to throw the lightsaber over his shoulder, but the second he did, I was like, okay, where are you going with this movie?
I think that, him throwing the lightsaber over his shoulder, I think, is definitely a poor, what do you call it? It's a sign of things to come in terms of the disregard for the previous movies. If I was to fix this up, I would have maybe had him just drop it instead of being so dramatic. But outside of the transitionary phase from the Luke we see at the end of Force Awakens to sassy Luke, which I think is clearly two different characters. J.J. Abrams has old wise Jedi Luke on the mind, and Rian Johnson, I think correctly, is we need to do something that's more, I don't know about more grounded, but I think that it does compute that Luke is done with it all and feels defeated and goes into exile, and that person doesn't need to be a noble, wise, stoic character.
He wanted to make new Jedis and make the world a better place, and instead he created the most evil Jedi that has existed since Darth Vader. So yeah, no, he's not exactly killing it. I liked the Mark Hamill's performance, and I don't mind Dark Luke. I kind of wish it would have led somewhere better than just taking Luke off of the board. It would have been interesting to see what he could have. Maybe the redemption arc in the end wasn't Kylo's. Maybe it was Luke's.
I mean, I think definitely it was
Luke's.
In this movie, it was definitely Luke's.
Yeah.
I mean, I do also want to say, it's unfortunate because this movie feels kind of like it has 4 acts. It should end kind of in the throne room, and then we get all of the crate stuff, which I think pacing-wise isn't great. But in terms of, the scene itself, I think that Luke facing off with Kylo is also a very correct choice and handled very, very well. And I love that they give just enough hints that something's off so that you could guess that. Maybe you're not going to specifically guess that he's force projecting, but you have the pieces there without it being completely blatant. And I all of that and samurai showdown between Luke and Kylo, I think absolutely lands. And I think it is a good redemption and send off and final moment for Luke Skywalker, especially when all of the guns fire on him and he just brushes his shoulder.
The only thing that confused me, because doesn't he give something to Leia or to?
Yes, he gives Leia the Han dice,
The dice.
which we know the origin story of. Aren't we lucky?
Right. That was the part of the movie that got my kids so excited. The whole standoff between Luke Skywalker and the entire every gun on that man. But again, I was just conflicted. Like every other scene in the movie, there was stuff that I liked and stuff that I didn't. I'm sorry. I think I'm going to pull the plug on it because we're at 36 minutes. Final thoughts? Jerry Springer's final thoughts on The Last Jedi?
It does a lot of subversion of The Force Awakens, but not to its own detriment. Some weakness in the B plot, but the A plot more.
Yeah.
I think I'll agree that the A-plot is one of the best Star Wars content that there is.
What are you doing there, 3PO?
Taking one last look, sir.
as my friends.
Confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi. Your destiny. The Force will be with you. Always.
I think Rise of Skywalker was officially the moment for me in the Disney trilogy where I'm not going to say that I full on lost interest, but any measure of excitement that I had for the future of Star Wars has been substantially dampered by it. And that is a weirdly harsh place to start, but it is just a fact. It's how I feel. The movie was profoundly disappointing.
I actually, coming into this one, the first time I saw it years ago when it was in the theater, I had a sense of what was the last one of the prequels?
The Revenge of the Sith?
Yeah, it was like Revenge of the Sith, where I was already kind of checked out, but you might as well just get this over with. So I mean, this didn't destroy my love of the Disney Star Wars by any measure. It was just oh god, okay, let's just do this.
Well, and I wanted to talk to you about this because you, like me, have been a lifelong Star Wars fan. One of your great traumatic moments in childhood is losing a Star Wars action figure on a bus, right? And we didn't like Star Wars. We loved Star Wars. We lived Star Wars, and under that,
we experienced those 3 interminable years of Han being sold to that bounty hunter and really not knowing what was going to happen. Would we ever get closure?
We may never. We didn't know. And when you're a kid, 3 years might as well be 10, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I was curious, generally, before we sharpen our knives for Rise of Skywalker, generally, how do you feel about the Disney era of Star Wars? I've been of the opinion that the original trilogy is A, the prequels is F, and so far for me, Disney's been a hard C.
Yeah, I would put it around the C era. When the first of them came out, I was pretty sure that they'd play it super safe to apologize for the prequels, which is exactly what happened. It was the same plot as the first Star Wars. I liked I liked that they were going back to practical effects and some of the same lenses they used in the 70s. I've had the somewhat controversial opinion that the second in this trilogy is maybe the best because at least it was trying something new. And I'm not going to defend it was a bad movie, but at least it wasn't about the same fucking shit.
It was
recycled.
A big swing.
Yeah, it was a big swing and a big miss. There were things about the second one that I liked, and then this one, my analogy for watching this Disney trilogy is between Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams, it's like watching improv comedians who just passive-aggressively hate each other.
They're blocking each other.
Every decision is, not even a no but, it was just a no.
Yeah, hard no every time.
As I sometimes say, it was watching it was like being on a road trip with my parents. It's this palpable tension.
Well, I want to say a few good things about Rise of Skywalker, okay? Here's what I like about, and generally this has been true about the Disney movies, the world feels more real to me than it did in anything that happened in the prequels. There was something so artificial and plastic about everything, and CGI, obviously CGI of the prequel series, that I really appreciate the tactile reality that I'm presented with. The TIE fighters and the space fights feel more real than they have to me in a long time. And the creatures feel more real to me than I have in a long time.
And I've said in the past that this movie, especially in the first act, seems like it's all over the place and in a terrible rush. But I like the energy that they're trying to put into the movie. Like, it feels like it's a climactic third act, even though nothing that exciting ends up happening as far as I'm concerned. You can see that they're trying to imbue this sort of flat script with more energy than it kind of deserves. And I see the effort being made there. Like, it's not a catastrophe, and I think it's really easy for us Star Wars fans to fall into the vitriol, so...
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem that they made was having this big monumental revive of Star Wars trilogy that wasn't the least bit plotted out. Like, not even, okay, Ryan Johnson, you have to start here and end here, and then the third one will start here and end here, and do all sorts of crazy stuff along the way, but this is our trajectory. But basically, you've got people that are just, like, having this passive-aggressive, like, sniping fight with their movies, and then you've got the third one, and not only does it have to close off the trilogy, but also it has to introduce every single plot element. So on your review for the prequels way back when, you were talking about how you think the Phantom Menace didn't even have to be in that trilogy.
Yeah.
You know, kind of started with Attack of the Clones. This one, it was like the entire trilogy was in this last movie, and everything that came before was, like, I don't know, basically all of it could have been accomplished in 10 minutes when they introduced the characters.
It was just we had the character set up, but everything happened here. And it's just the sin of not having a master plan. If you want to make a bunch of Star Wars movies, good, make a bunch of Star Wars trilogies. If you announce that you're doing a new trilogy, do a trilogy. I was talking to Lee Beckmann about how there's crazy parallels between the trilogy of this Disney Star Wars and the new Halloween trilogy, in which the first one was just completely fan service. The second one was flawed, but we gave it a pass because it's the middle chapter and by its very design has no beginning or ending, right? And the third one all of a sudden introduces a bunch of new shit that had nothing to do with the previous two movies. And we're like, there was no master plan here. We feel kind of lied to.
Yeah, and you're supposed to have an emotional reaction to it. Like, oh, geez, Zori Bliss came to save the day. That sure is a character that I've been invested in her relationship with Poe. Like, yeah. It's just like all this shit out of nowhere.
And it is written like someone who was raised on video games. It's all goal-oriented stuff. They need to find the Sith compass. And then they need to keep the Sith knight. And then they have to find the planet. But, like, there's all these levels. They're not acts. They're not chapters. They're levels.
Yeah, so I was thinking two things about it. One is ungenerous and one is generous. And the generous one is perhaps overly generous, but whatever. The ungenerous one is this feels like 150 TikTok videos just stitched together. So it was actually quite easy for me to watch the second time. The first time I watched it in the theater, and it was just torture to sit through the whole thing. But this one, you know, I was like cooking or washing dishes or whatever. I was drifting in and out, and it really didn't matter because the last thing that you needed to ever know was introduced 30 seconds earlier. So it's just like, just watch these TikToks. It's just this mess. More generously, though, in some ways I think it's come full circle from what George Lucas wanted the Star Wars world to be, which was an homage to those Saturday afternoon serials, which are just these staccato images. They're kind of sloppily stitched together. What's going to happen? It just plays out. You know, Chewie's been kidnapped. Chewie's alive. We don't have ships. The ships are here. And you know, how are we going to get aboard this Star Destroyer? Here's this magic key code. And it really does. It has this feeling of reading like newspaper cartoons or something like that.
Yeah. I also do think you can overplay your hand in fan service. Like, yeah, there's the holographic chess game that we keep seeing over and over again. And yeah, this time, this guy's going to get not just force choked, but he's going to get force choked and thrown up into the room. And let's do everything that they've seen before, but just a little bit bigger, right?
Yeah, every Star Destroyer has a Death Star laser.
Yeah. And really, as much as I was happy to see Lando Calrissian
if you're going to do that little with him, what is he doing in the movie?
Well, what are those other, like, rebel stormtroopers doing in the movie? The ones that rode those horses that have the tusk? Like, I don't know, they just showed up. They didn't even need them. Like, literally nothing would have changed if they didn't show up.
All I liked about that was to know that there were, in fact, other people who decided, you know what, being a stormtrooper sucks, and they left. The movie seems to have presented, like, this character that we were introduced to was the first guy who ever thought of doing that.
Although I will say, as far as negative things go, I have always been, since I watched the second one in the theater, really strongly Team Rose. Like, she was the first character in the Disney trilogy that I thought was, like, kind of charismatic. Because everybody else is like, either stoic and boring or just so quippy. You know, Finn and Poe are going to get executed and they're quipping with each other. Like, oh, thanks for sucking all of the tension out of this. I thought Rose was a really great character, and then the way, like, she's like, oh, this one, I'll go along with you guys. No, you've got to stay home and study Star Destroyer schematics. It was like such a fuck you to Ryan Johnson and her character.
Yeah, completely humiliatingly benched that character. I mean, I was really debating about her decision at the end of the Last Jedi. Like, I really do think that was a bad decision that Rose made, but I didn't hate her character. But yeah, this just seemed, in a weird way, to be like fan service for the haters. There was a lot of haters for Rose, so let's let the haters have their say in this movie. I'm starting to be of the opinion that, like, hardcore Star Wars fans, especially trolls on the internet, they're just not going to be happy. So stop trying to make them happy and make a new Star Wars movie.
Well, honestly, I mean, there are some problems with some of the Disney Plus stuff, but The Mandalorian is much better than this.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe the Book of Boba Fett, I was kind of lukewarm on that one, but whatever. Like, you can strike a better balance, and if you've got a creative behind it with some vision, and just don't read the tweets, just like make the trilogy that you want to make. Like, there's something very pick-me about, you know, these Star Wars trilogy, just sort of desperately trying to make everybody happy that they're making nobody happy. Like, just say, fuck it, we're keeping Rose in. She's a character now. Either deal with it or don't.
Yeah. And again, the redemption arc that they're going for here with the Adam Driver character. As a fan of Star Wars, in the first movie, when Han Solo took the Obi-Wan role and died at the end of the movie, as a Star Wars fan, that made this dude like the ultimate Star Wars villain. You killed Han fucking Solo. So I wasn't particularly invested in a redemption arc in this character. In fact, I don't really think that Darth Vader's redemption arc is all that great, considering he did everything awful until the last possible second to stop the death of his only son. What a great guy.
I actually, among the positive things, because I've got a lot of daggers that I can stick into this movie.
Oh, yes.
Among the positive things is I actually did like Adam Driver. I liked his chemistry with Daisy Ridley. Even though Daisy Ridley seemed a bit checked out, probably from 6 years of vitriolic Twitter hate. She just wanted to be out of this. When those two were on screen together, I liked it, and I kind of bought that they had formed a bond. Like, I kind of felt something from their bond, and so I could sort of see him, you know, when he is going to that weird planet and fighting those guys that just showed up all of a sudden that were like level bosses, but we didn't know who they were, and then she used the Force to hand him her lightsaber. Like, kind of all of that stuff I liked, and that was much better for me than those billions of ships showing up.
The space fight was actually kind of boring, and like, that stings.
Yeah.
That stings. And look, all of a sudden the Emperor's still alive, and he has the biggest fleet of ships that ever existed. That is terrible writing. That is just obviously terrible writing. Like,
also the obvious question of who's aboard them, because he's using the Force to make them appear. Like, he could have just gone Lord of the Rings and said, I don't know, there's ghost pilots aboard, whatever.
robots. What happened to the droid armies? We've seen those before. I don't. It like that whole wing of the story doesn't work for me. I think Adam Driver's a really good actor, and I think he sells some scenes that I think a lesser actor, sorry Mark Hamill, would maybe not have been able to pull off. But I give all the credit to the performances and none to the script. And again, just as a Star Wars fan, I wanted to see him defeated, not redeemed, honestly. It's just how I felt.
So I didn't mind seeing him redeemed. The problem was there was no real villain, but again, I'm kind of split here, because another one of the few things I liked was the horror movie Palpatine. I thought he had a presence on the screen, particularly when I saw it in the theater. But also, he was a lame villain because he's just like whack-a-mole Palpatine. It's like, who gives a fuck? And all of a sudden, I am all of the Sith. I'm like, you're not. Like, that's not what the franchise has been establishing. So it would have been nice to have one final enemy that gets defeated and there's this sense of, like, I don't know, closure. It could have been, honestly, it should have been, was that guy's name Snoke?
Yeah, Snoke.
Probably should have been Snoke.
Yeah. But with the Emperor, at least they were consistent with his character in that he was always overplaying his hand. Good. Yeah. You will do as I say, and you will rule the world, and there will be no last-second catch.
You're my plan, Daisy Ridley, is for you to strike me down. Like, yeah, I wonder how this is going to turn out.
And I mean, Snoke was just the Emperor too, but at least you had the chance to take it in a different direction with that guy, and a chance of. Look, the Carrie Fisher stuff was not their fault. They didn't plan on Carrie Fisher dying. It was very rude of her to do that. But again, I can see just as, like, spitballing ideas in my head, ways that it could have been handled in a more graceful manner. They used footage from her that went unused from the first movie and some CGI alterations to kind of, like, plug her into the movie. If you're going to start this movie with this huge sudden retrofit, the Emperor is here, like, maybe the Emperor announces his presence by killing Princess Leia. Like...
Yeah, for sure.
Like, it just... There was... Again, they did the best that they could, and I think they wanted to honor Carrie Fisher, and it's hard to slap their hand for that, but I don't know. It was taking me out of it because, we know that that's not Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, that was pretty bad, particularly the CGI flashback between her and CGI Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
And back to what you said about this feeling like a video game, that was a total cutscene.
Exactly. Yeah, and... I've been seeing that more and more. A lot of people were comparing the last Jurassic World movie with this one, and I think it's got because of that similar vibe. There's no real through-line plot. There's just a series of events or levels that happened, goals that need to be met, and boxes that need to be ticked off, and plot points. And, like, it doesn't feel like a movie anymore. It feels like 2.5 hours of middle.
I couldn't agree more, which is why... it was easier to watch when it was just on in the background and I could drift in and out because, it's like watching your friend play video games and you could, like, get a beer or make popcorn or something, and it's pretty easy to resituate yourself. And also the movie itself, like, there's no Chekhov's gun or anything like that. The movie will 100% forgive you for popping in at any place.
Yeah. And Rey has suddenly the new Force powers to heal things. And that's new, but that's going to come in handy in the climax of the movie. I did actually like some of the interactions that were happening on the Imperial ship with the spy and everything like this. When the general figured out who the spy was and immediately executed him, it made me laugh out loud. I don't know.
Okay, so that's like the executing of, what was his name? Domhnall Gleeson's character, I can't remember. That quick execution was the only thing about that subplot. Everything about that I fucking hated, right down to him saying, "I'm the spy." I was like, this is not how you were written. Watch the first two movies. He was never the spy.
No, he was a completely over the top vitriolic like believer. But I did like the line. I don't care if you win. I just need Kylo Ren to lose. And I just liked how directly he was dealt with. It was immediate, like done.
Even if you're gonna do that, don't have the line, "I'm the spy."
Yeah, that was the fact that you just killed their executioners. Kind of spilled those beans for you.
Yeah. That was one of the worst scenes of the movie when they were like knelt down, gonna get laser blasts in the back of the head, and they're still fucking quipping like this is a sitcom or something.
Yeah.
So, just like, we need a mood. We need to establish a mood. This movie opened up like a horror movie, and then it's like just, like there's no emotional through line whatsoever.
This is as far as you know, the last few seconds of your life, you know. And if you want us to believe that you're in danger, you have to believe you're in danger. And the movie fails at shit like this all the time. Like, no Star Wars fan in the world believed that Chewie was killed in that explosion, right? Like, first of all, they're not going to kill Chewbacca. And secondly, even if they were going to kill Chewbacca, it wasn't going to be an off-screen explosion sort of death. Like, it just... It was so obvious, I don't know why they tried to even make it a thing. Like...
Yeah, and also Chewbacca was alive in the trailer in the Millennium Falcon with Lando, so they already said that Chewbacca's living.
It's a bit of a tell.
But like, at least, yeah, like have the actors feel the emotion. Like we could all know Chewbacca is alive, and if Daisy Ridley thinks that she killed him, then this can be part of her arc. It's that much more tragic if she turns to the dark side on the mistaken belief that she'd killed Chewie. That's fine. It's like, keep the mood for more than a few seconds.
I think it might be why these TV versions of Star Wars are working in a weird way better for them, because at 25 minutes at a time, they can just do whatever little blub of story they need to cover for that 25 minutes, and then it's the next episode. But if you just string 5 episodes together with no credit sequences, it's not a movie. I don't know what it is, but it's not a movie.
So I would say, like, Mandalorian works really well for me because I think all of the episodes were storyboarded. So every episode needed to end somewhere, needed to introduce something to get the next ones going. Kenobi, as far as I understand, was meant to be a movie, and it actually felt like a TV show with a lot of filler. And so I actually liked the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, although it had some real problems. But at least, again, it had a direction. I think that's the real issue. It's like having a direction.
Yeah. But generally speaking, I mean, I think Disney spent $4 billion on Star Wars, so they're going to make their money back. And, like, love it or hate it, this is the Star Wars we're getting. And as far as this revisionist history, people who are saying that, you know, give it back to George Lucas, I really don't think you were paying attention. I really don't think you're paying attention. But I have to say, for a climactic third chapter in this epic new Star Wars trilogy, this is a limp noodle of a movie. And how limp? Like the first time I saw it, when Adam Driver was having the conversation with Han Solo, I'm somehow, as a huge Star Wars fan, didn't clock the I know answer as being an echo back to Empire Strikes Back. I was so checked out that what I thought when Han said I know, he was just literally dismissing it as, I know.
Well, so I think there may be some, like, the kind of credence where it's not super upfront, but you can just tell, you know, the level of checked out Harrison Ford was. When he died, he was clean shaven and his hair was relatively short. This one, he looked like Harrison Ford on a bender. He's got like 7 days growth. His hair's all undone, and like they obviously have hairdressers on the set, but he's like, I'm not gonna get my hair done. Like he seemed. There was a lot about this movie that had a strong fuck you vibe, right? Like a lot of the fuck you vibe to Rian Johnson, but it seemed like Harrison Ford had a fuck you vibe to just being in this thing. Like, yeah, okay, I'll get whatever, $10 million to be in this one scene, but I'm not gonna treat it as though I'm a professional
Harrison Ford is sort of, I think, completely checked out of, like, acting in general, to be honest. I think his sort of peak heyday passed, and in order to stay relevant, he just started mining his old popular titles. Let's do another Blade Runner. Let's do another Indiana Jones. Fuck it. Let's do some more Star Wars. And,
oh, man, that's going to be so bad. The next Indiana Jones movie.
He's 78 years old. Like, it's...
he wears it like he's older than that.
And it's sort of like the Scorsese movie Irishman. Like, you can try and digitally re-age their faces, but they still move and talk like old people. And I just picture, like... I picture, like, mid-afternoon each day on set, they stop so everyone can have a fucking nap. Like...
Which, no hate, I like to have naps in the afternoon, but I'm also not an action movie star.
That's right. Anyway...
I think Harrison Ford, in the mid-2000s, tried to make a comeback, because he was in Ender's Game, and I think he was hoping that would be a franchise. I think that was the last movie that he tried.
He invested himself in, yeah. I mean, he's been doing it since the 70s, but part of me says if you're that checked out, just retire and give someone else a turn.
Yeah, why not? I mean, he's certainly not, he doesn't have big Han Solo energy anymore.
No. And that's sort of what Poe was representing, that vibe of character. But Poe is, again, completely at sea in this movie. What is his arc? What does he do? He's present.
Well, they retroactively made him a smuggler and a scoundrel. Like, all of that was in this one. With Zori Bliss, who's just... everything about that character I hate. Down to the fact that she looks like a Flash Gordon character instead of a Star Wars character. She's got a stupid name.
Take the helmet
off. She represents just the worst of Disney cynicism. But she's talking about him... I don't know what. Like, all of it. It's just like shit that should have been backstory from 1977. Jabba saying you dumped cargo or whatever, and we're like, oh, this person's got an interesting backstory. Like, we've known Poe. He's a soldier. He's a fighter pilot. He's not a smuggler. It's too late to make him Han Solo.
And, like, Boyega, our de facto stormtrooper, who we started this whole story with, and who's like, what was his arc? What was his, like, what did he do?
His entire arc was in the first movie.
Yeah. They had no idea what to do with him. I mean, if it's hard to get, like, the dream role and free ticket into Hollywood and feel shortchanged, but I kind of feel like he got done dirty by this series.
100%. And, I mean, it's weird because, like, Oscar Isaac and John Boyega, they're professionals. Like, they were delivering their lines like they meant it. Like, they were disappearing into their roles, but it was just shit. Like, what they had to work with is garbage.
And, like, I haven't been attacking the performances, and I won't. Like, and I have been attacking the special effects or like the look of the film, because I don't. But the script is terrible, and it's obviously terrible. Like, wow.
And this has to fall at the feet of Kathleen Kennedy, because ultimately the problem is it wasn't a trilogy, right? No. It's like, make it up as you go along. You could say J.J. Abrams was trying his best, although again, I thought there was something snide towards Rian Johnson and something very trying to make all of the Twitter bullies happy. So there's too much, like, you couldn't even call it fan service. It's like the lowest common denominator of Star Wars fan service.
Well, and here's a cruel fact. With the exception of Han Solo, the Han Solo movie, which I didn't think was that bad, by the way, any Star Wars movie makes money. This movie made a ton of money. I mean, as much as all the fans say it's an epic failure, as far as Disney's concerned, they did make their money back.
Yeah.
But they also knew that the fans weren't happy with it. And I think focusing on the TV for a while might have been the right move.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I thought the Star Wars Han Solo movie was whatever. I watched it on a plane, and it was, I think, adequate for watching on a plane. I would have felt ripped off if I'd spent money on it, but it was still, I think, the best of the Star Wars movies. But, I mean, at this point, I think Disney understands that, you know, like, their iconic character, Mickey Mouse, has never You just have to keep it in circulation so that it can serve as a mascot to slap on shit.
But that was the attitude of the whole movie. It wasn't, we have these characters, we have this world. That's enough. We don't need a story.
Yeah. Well, and then they introduce there's that stupid fucking thing that wiped C-3PO's memories, like goo goo
Right.
boo boo. There was that stupid droid who was even cuter than BB-8, who just reaching uncanny levels of cuteness. Like, stop it, guys. Like, pull it back. I'm getting a toothache.
And what was that doing but padding the runtime? Like, what did that little robot contribute?
I mean, in the end, it was like the Deus Ex Machina. Oh, in its memory, it knows where things are. But then, all of that was to say then, an hour and 15 minutes of this movie didn't need to happen because that droid had all of the information.
And again, that was my problem with The Last Jedi. The entire B plot could have been cut from the movie, and like the movie would have withstood it fine. Like, if half of the movie doesn't need to be there, there's a problem, right?
Yes.
Anyway, I don't know. Is there any final thoughts? I've been trying to discipline these reviews to under a half an hour. So
Are we way over half an hour? We're not way over.
We're just over half an hour right now, but you know.
No, I mean, I don't know that I've got anything to say that hasn't been said a million times already. I would have had a bunch of hot takes if you'd asked me in 2021. Or was it 2020? Whenever it came out.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's disappointing. I don't know what else to say. I was going in hoping that it didn't suck, and then it did suck, and it sucked enough that my level of excitement for Star Wars has dropped. Full confession, Matt. I've watched Mandalorian with my kids, and I've watched Obi-Wan. That's it. I haven't watched any of the other Star Wars. I'm just like, I'll probably get around to it one of these times, but like, I'm not excited about Star Wars anymore. And if you would have told me when I was a little kid that there would be a day where I wasn't excited about Star Wars, you would have broken my little kid heart, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I can say there's some, in much the same way that because of context of how I watched it, there's a sentimental place in my heart for Phantom Menace, because I used to watch it a lot with my friends. Well, it was always on in the background. We would be playing video games, whatever. It was fun. This one, I was riding around on a scooter in China with my buddy, and we noticed that this was the premiere day, so we decided just to go in and watch it. Huge fucking megaplex. There were 4 people including the 2 of us, so we had like the entire theater to ourselves, because these movies don't play well in China, and it was kind of like watching the season finale of Game of Thrones with some friends, where I didn't know if they hated it as much as me, so there was like some polite talking about it until the plug gets pulled, like, yeah, we both hate it, and then it was like, whoosh, like we just couldn't stop.
I went through 24 hours of denial after I first saw The Phantom Menace. Whereas, like, it certainly wasn't what I wanted it to be, but it's not exactly bad. And then 24 hours later, no, it's not exactly bad, but it is terrible. It is terrible.
Yeah. It's funny. Shout out to a friend of the show, Rayleigh Perkins. She just texted me the other day. Oh, actually, double shout out, because I watched this on her Disney Plus account. I'm not sure if she knows that I got her password. But she just watched The Phantom Menace, and she has some opinions on that you can ask her about.
I will. Thank you so much for doing this, brother.
Yeah, no problem. I was happy to do it last minute, get a chance to rewatch this movie, and I mean, as much as I don't have anything good to say about it, I did like it more the second time around.
Yeah, well, that's something.
Yeah.
So it'll be a while before we revisit the world of Star Wars again, as there's going to hopefully be some new standalone features, and if they ever attempt an actual trilogy again, maybe they'll take it a little bit more seriously as to what a trilogy is meant to do and be. But I think generally, yeah, Disney deserves to have their finger wagged at them, but that the fan base for Star Wars is not necessarily reasonable or real about what they want from Star Wars. The perfect Star Wars movie might still be out there, but I think the perfect Star Wars movie might need to be watched when you're still, 10 or 11 years old. If you have feedback, send that feedback to ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. The website is ranknreview.ca. I drop every other Wednesday, and if you need something to fill your ears and the gaps in between, please check out the Shelf Shedding Movie Show. It's of high quality, and it's hosted by my good friend, Mr. Jason Dubray. I will talk to you all again very soon.